Hey Team Plants, this lecture's a little unusual. It doesn't come from any book. It just comes from my experiences as a landscape architect and human being. But I think it's really important that somebody tell you why plants are the best design medium ever so that we can own that, because it's really the only medium that is just ours. So plants are so many things. I've grouped it into 6 main categories. They're sustaining and enriching, they're ecologically significant, they're dangerous, they're dynamic, they're sensual, and they're meaningful. Let me tell you a little bit more. So plants provide us so many things that are the basis of our lives: food and forage for our livestock, protection from the elements, building materials and tools, whether it's lumber for building or even just using a thorn or a spine for a fish hook. Plants also provide the fiber that's the basis of many of our clothes. So thank you, plants, that we're all not running around naked. Plants are also sources of many medicines that we use to treat our ailments. And lastly, plants are sources of luxury items like wine and pesto, or toys like sticks. Plants are also ecologically significant. They consume carbon dioxide and release oxygen into the atmosphere. Their roots hold soil against the erosive forces of water and wind. Plants also clean water, helping sediment fall out of it or removing contaminants. They provide habitat for birds and reptiles and mammals and insects. And their root zones host millions of microorganisms that are pretty much the engine for life above ground as we know it. But overall, plants are the fundamental support for ecosystems. They're pretty much responsible for every terrestrial ecosystem that we know, and they're major players in aquatic ones too. Plants can also be quite dangerous. They're armed with spines and thorns and prickles. They irritate us with their pollen or oils that cause rashes. They attract pests, whether they provide habitat for snakes or a place for stinging insects to build their nests. They can also grow quite large and in fact be so heavy that if a part of them were to break off and fall, like the limb of a tree, it would cause significant damage to property, as well as injury or even death to a person. Plants can also be poisonous and even lethal. There are certain plants that we'll learn about on K-State campus that if you were to ingest them even in small amounts, would kill you. Plants are dynamic. They change all the time and in so many ways. And this is one of the reasons why they bring such drama to our designs. So over the course of a year, of course, plants change with the seasons. They may be barren in the winter and with new green leaves in the spring or even flowers, darker green leaves in the summer, and bright colors in autumn. Plants also change over the course of their lives. So a small plant in a 3-gallon container that you may plant this year may be 10 or 15 feet tall a few years from now. And the ways that plants change over the course of their lives means that as designers, we have to think on scales of 5, 15, 60 years. This is something that many other designers don't have to think about. Plants also reproduce in all sorts of ways. They can reproduce both sexually and asexually. Some plants, in which individuals may be one gender or another, can actually change genders from one year to the next. So plants exhibit a sexual fluidity that makes them super interesting. Plants also have an interesting life cycle. Many plants go dormant over the course of the year during the cool season, and so it appears that their above ground parts have died, when in fact they've just died back, and rootstock will regenerate new shoots the coming year. Plants are also very sensual. They stimulate all 5 of our senses. They provide us beautiful things to look at, whether it's color or texture or plays of light and shadow. They make interesting sounds, whether it's the wind moving through their leaves or the crunch of leaves underfoot as we walk on them. They have all sorts of textures, from smooth to furry to rough. They're a joy to touch. And they smell all sorts of ways, whether it's the lovely fragrance of a lily of the valley flower, to the pungent smell of ginkgo fruit, to the straight up nasty smell of rotting flesh produced by the Amorphophallus fetida flower, the image seen in the middle of the slide. And of course, we can't talk about plants without their tastes. They're responsible for all the delicious food we eat, whether it's the sour of the lemon, or the sweet of the date, or the spice of the chili pepper, or the burn of pepper and garlic, ginger, saffron, cumin, coriander, cilantro, peppers, tomatoes. I really could go on and on. But we have plants to taste for the wonderful, delicious experiences we have eating. I have a little bit more to say about the sensuality of plants, so I'm going to cut to this video right here. Since we're talking about sensuality, I thought I'd take a trip to the KSU Gardens, which to me is one of the most romantic spots on campus, and if you haven't been here yet, I highly recommend that you come. You know, I said plants are sensual, but it doesn't really matter how sensual plants are if you are not sensual yourself. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to encourage you, as future landscape architects, to start to cultivate a presence with your own body and your 5 senses. And what do I mean by that? What I really mean is that you start to cultivate being present in the sensory experiences that you have in your everyday life. So if you see something beautiful, like vegetation or flowers, or the interesting play of light and shadow at a certain time of day, appreciate that. If you smell something lovely, take a deep breath. If you smell something nasty, pay attention to that too. Maybe you don't have to breathe so deeply, but pay attention to that. If you hear something lovely, like birds or water moving over stones, or children riding on a scooter past you while you're sitting here recording your lecture in the garden, enjoy that sound. If you have the opportunity to touch something that has an interesting texture, like these fern fronds, go for it. And lastly, if you have the opportunity to taste something, whether it's to chew the leaves of a sourwood tree and get that delicious sour taste in your mouth, or actually eat a fruit or a vegetable that you can pick right off of a plant, take a moment and savor that. Enjoy it. Because when you can have an appreciation for the sensual experiences that are part of human life, you'll be able to make better informed choices with your plant palette, and you'll also be able to awaken your client to those opportunities for them too. Lastly, I want to talk about all of the meanings that we've ascribed to plants as human beings. So of course, as human beings, we live in our bodies, we live in our minds, we live in our hearts, and oftentimes we like to mix those things together. So it's no surprise that people, both individually and in groups, put certain meanings on plants that we share with each other. So first off, people may assign a plant a certain personal meaning because it reminds them of somebody they love or an experience they've had in their life. Groups also like to look to plants as symbols for their group, whether it's sunflowers for Kansans, or magnolia trees and flowers for people who live in the southeastern U.S., or even sugar maples for Canadians. Canadians love that sugar maple so much they've even put it on their flag. And people also use plants to symbolize abstract ideas. So like, for example, roses symbolize love or friendship. Wheat can symbolize plenty. Olive branches symbolize peacemaking. Weeping willows symbolize mourning and grief. And pineapples are symbols of hospitality. I also want to talk a little bit more about plant and meaning, so I'm going to tell you this story here. One of the things that you have to be sensitive to about the meaningfulness of plants is that sometimes the meaning of the plant for a client does not necessarily correspond with how the plant looks. So as an example of that, I want to tell you about horse apples. Horse apples are the very unusual fruit of the Osage orange tree. And they are native to this little corner of the country that is around where Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri all meet. I guess Kansas too. But anyways, Osage orange, it's typically used as a living hedge. It likes to grow in thickets. It has pretty serious thorns. Settlers to the area used it to create natural fencing for pastures. But the fruits of this tree, these horse apples, are outstanding. They're the size of a grapefruit. They look like a big green brain. You don't really eat them. They're really good for chucking at your siblings or walls and watching them explode. Anyways, so I grew up mostly in Northeast Oklahoma, and my family moved to Houston when I was a sophomore in high school. And, the Houston landscape, nothing like Oklahoma. It was pretty much like leaving everything that I had ever known behind. Fast forward a few years of feeling really out of place in Houston. I was with my cross-country team in Dallas for a regional meet, and we were warming up the day before running the course, and all of a sudden in the path in front of us there are these horse apples in the path, and nobody on the team knew what they were, but I was like, horse apples! And I picked them up and I carried it around, and for me it was like having a little window, or a port key, if you want to make like a Harry Potter reference, like a port key to my childhood and to this portion of my life that, I had essentially been separated from for years. And here, holding this horse apple in my hand, it was like a way that I could be whole again. And ever since then, every time I see a horse apple, I just light up. I love them so much. So I'm going to give you a little shot of it right here. Let me see if I can show it to you without getting stuck on the thorns of this Osage orange tree. Ah, there it is. Hello, Mama. Look at that beautiful horse apple. Anyways, like I said, makes no sense that I love this tree and I love that fruit so much, except with that story. So when your clients tell you stories like that, be sure and pay attention to them, because tapping into that meaning of plants is one of the things that gives us the greatest power with this medium. And that's why plants rock. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize that there are other design media that also exhibit many of these things. Stone, wood, water, metal, ceramics. But none of the other design media have all of these things the way plants do. And that's why having this medium at the heart of our profession is so powerful, because we can do so many things with plants. It's just fantastic. So that's it. If you have anything you want to add to this, either a response to something I've brought up or another reason that you have for why plants rock, I'd like you to add it to the discussion in the introduction module. Thanks.